Welcome to Business Coaching Secrets with Karl Bryan. If you want to attract new high-end coaching clients, fill live events, and build a wildly profitable coaching practice where business owners pay, stay, and refer, you've come to the right place. In this podcast, Karl provides his keys to the kingdom for finding and signing high-paying clients and building the coaching business of your dreams. Here we go.
Hey everybody, and welcome to Business Coaching Secrets. Christian Road here, aka the Road Dog, along with the man in the high castle, the Grinch himself, but he's got a warm heart, Mr. Karl Bryan. Are you there, sir?
I am, Road Dog. How goes it, brother?
It's going good. You know what? Before we even get cracking here, but there's something that hit me, right? So it's like, here we are, right? 2020. Can you believe it, right? Like, it's this whole 2020. I know everyone's going to be playing off of that quite a bit, but I just wanted to get your thoughts on this as well, because you and I are obviously big Tony Robbins fans, and I will give it to you that you're probably bigger a Tony Robbins fan than I am, and that's saying a lot. But when we've talked about this so many times in the past, and it's the whole 2020, like we're not just entering a year here, we're entering a new decade. And you know exactly where I'm going with this, right? Like, many people underestimate what they can do in a year, but it's just that whole, what about a decade? Like, what are your thoughts as we're looking at this 2020 staring us in the face here? What are your thoughts on that, in terms of just a little bit of, we're entering a new decade mindset, and just sort of having that right there in your vision?
Yeah, dude, I agree. I think that it should be remember like 2000, right? Like you and I were chatting about that long ago, right? But like, I remember exactly where I was in 2000, what I was doing, the suit I was wearing, etc. So it's 2020. Really, if you kind of set yourself up to have that same kind of impact on yourself, to kind of just jog you into action, like, okay, like, let's rock and stinking roll. I would look at it like what you just said a minute ago. We overestimate madly what we can do in 12 months. Okay, the same way that people overestimate. Like, let's say it's Christmas, holidays, New Year's, right? Everybody I'm going to go on this trip. I'm going to do this. I'm going to meditate. I'm going to hit the gym. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. Next thing you know, it started, right? It's like, January 15th. It's the 30th. The damn year is well and truly underway. And you're like, I didn't do any of that stuff, right? So we overestimate madly what we can do in 12 months. And then we underestimate madly to the point where I don't think we plan it out at all, what we can do in 10 years. And as unexciting as that can be to some, especially the more A-type analytic, or, like, let's rock and roll, like right here, right now types, which is a lot of coaches, by the way. That macro perspective, I don't think it's nearly as exciting, but, mapping out what you're going to do over 10 years can be a real game changer, right? Because it doesn't mean that you can't deviate, and it doesn't mean that you can't take a left or right turn. But creating that bigger vision for yourself. In fact, I might go here. A buddy of mine named Brian Delaney, he's a heavyweight in the Russell Brunson world, smart guy, a very, a super successful company. And one of the things he did, so he won a contest. Tony Robbins and Dean Graziosi did the mastermind program, and it was like the biggest launch in the internet history. Like, they broke the internet in the middle of it, actually. Yep. So he was one of the top 5 affiliates for the entire thing. So as a reward for that, they went to Tony Robbins' place in Fiji, and actually I think it was the top 10. I think the top 10 got invited, and then he put this on Facebook, and I actually asked him in a private, like, we're buds, so I asked him in a private message on Facebook. We were back and forth a little about it, but he said the number one thing that he learned from his time one-on-one with Tony Robbins is to create a bigger vision for yourself. Right? Like, what is that macro? Like, he's working on solving world hunger as an example, right? Like, if you come up insanely short, you know what I mean? You probably did something from a growth and contribution perspective, pretty damn cool, right? So what is that bigger picture for yourself? And I kind of go like, so we're business coaches. like, alleviating business failure in your city. Like, we live in a city called Kelowna, so Road Dog and I are going to team up, and we are going to stop business failure in Kelowna. A lofty goal. Frankly, we're not going to achieve, the chances of achieving that would be, it's almost, like, that's big. Same way Tony Robbins is not going to, solve the world of world hunger, but he is going to make like a massive impact. I think that's pretty cool when you start thinking about that, much bigger picture. Maybe you're the guy or gal that's going to start the small business awards for your city. So you're not necessarily going to be able to alleviate business failure, but create a big event or something that people really aspire to, and a way for you to reward, not just, and you'll get coaching clients falling off a log if you do something like that with like 100% certainty. But what you really would be able to do is create a model where you were rewarding successful local business entrepreneurship, right? It's pretty cool. Like, who else is doing that locally? And you would struggle mightily to find somebody. That's an example. And I wouldn't call that a huge picture for yourself, like starting the local business awards, but it might be a lot bigger than what you're currently thinking, right? Like, what a lot of business coaches are thinking about is how they're going to get their next client, right? It's so micro, it's scary. And when you go up macro a little bit, it can be a big change. So yeah, Road Dog, I agree, man. 2020 is here, pretty damn powerful. And, let's go and create some big goals.
And then looking back too, right? Like, you look at it and go, like, where were you 10 years ago? Like, what were you doing? Are you in a better position now than you were then? All that sort of thing. It's 2020 just sort of struck me. It's like, holy smokes, a decade. Like, I read that somewhere and I was like, that's powerful. So now, speaking of 10 years ago, speaking of decades passing, this is perfect. Okay. So I'm going to jump into the questions here. Because somebody's talking about social media. So I can't even, like, I think you still had your profile on MySpace 10 years ago, but but I'm looking at this. No, hang on. What was that dating one? That guy on what was the big one back in the day? Like, it's crazy. Like, dating. No, there was another one before that. Anyways, we digress, and I'm sure everyone's interested in hearing about dating websites from 10 years ago. It's highly relevant to business coaching. But social media. So this guy's like, I've built up 10,000 followers, right? And he's talking about like which platforms to focus on. And it's interesting because you and I just had this conversation where I'm just like, man, like, TikTok is, the organic growth inside of that is huge, but you've got a bit of a different view on some of this stuff. So what are your thoughts when it comes to somebody trying to get traction on social media? What are your thoughts of where they should go?
Okay, if you're a business coach, there's three that, like, TikTok, again, it might be the next big thing, but the reality is that so many of those have come and gone, right? So I think that what you should be doing is being very strategic. And what do I want to say, for what's the right word? Like, from a time management perspective, make sure you're not smoking a bunch of time, right? But LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, those are the three that we concentrate on. I think as a business coach, LinkedIn can be pretty damn good. Facebook's just Facebook. At the end of the day, it's the kind of grandpa of the space nowadays, but everybody is still there. You go put your wedding photos, you go put your baby photo up there, you're getting hundreds of likes, right? So in other words, people are looking at this stuff. But I think those are the three that you should be spending your time on. I also think that it probably makes sense to drill down on one. But I'll tell you, if you're not using these free platforms, make no mistake, you talk about like a decade, Road Dog, you are going to kick yourself mightily for not going all in on these free platforms of LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and it might be TikTok, and it might be Snapchat or whatever for you. But you should be going all in on these things. When I say all in, like, building a list, building a following, and then very importantly, you take that following, and from a strategic point of view, you've got to turn it into something that you own, right? So you know what I mean by that? Your Facebook profile, you don't own it. It's somebody else's platform. The guy's name's Mark Zuckerberg. And at the end of the day, if he changes his mind, he adjusts something. Like I see that all the time. Like, I get a reasonable, I don't know, reasonable is the right word, but I get some engagement on my posts on Facebook. But every once in a while, I put one up and it just literally goes nowhere, right? And it's just very clear to me that there's something that I've written, like maybe I mentioned the podcast, maybe I mentioned something to do with my email list, maybe it's a photo that I put up that for some reason they're worried that there might be, copyright infringement of some description. Might be if you put music. We've done that, right, with live events where you've got music playing in the background. Boom, they're not going to allow that to hit. So therefore, that's a platform you don't own. So you need to take them from LinkedIn, from Facebook, from Instagram, from whatever platform you're on, onto something like an email list that you control or your own blog. Super duper important that you do that. This guy, what does he say? He's got 10,000. Look, value online comes in two forms. Super important, and only two forms: education, entertainment. So people want to be educated, but they'd rather be entertained. So really what you want to try and do is combine the two. And like I do that, definitely in my emails, right? Again, I try to be a little bit of a, I kind of try to be a little bit witty, and no doubt often it falls like a lead balloon. But the same one that falls with a lead balloon with one person is hilarious to somebody else, right? And I'm not pretending to be, Eddie Murphy here, right? I'm trying to be like, a little bit comical, a little bit smart-assy. I definitely have my opinion, and I'm not shy to express it. I believe that being a little bit on the edgy side or and I don't want to say, like, the last thing I would try to sit here and say that I'm trying to be as edgy, but most definitely, I don't want to be vanilla. Now that's official, right? And if you look at Howard Stern as an example, what I think is probably the number one guy ever to come out of radio. I mean, his entire shtick was just to be, what do they call him? The shock jock, right? Like, he's just shocking people was his entire game plan. So, okay, if you want to get attention, being contrarian will tend to be a little bit entertaining, right? Like, there's certain people that like that. Like, let me give you an example. Like, let's say I want to bring it back to a business coach and make sure that we're not talking about, we're talking about things that they're going to be able to deploy on. Like, if you started, let's say that you were going to talk about upselling, start it with a headline of "Careful not to upsell," or something like, "Don't make this mistake and alienate your best clients." You see how that's like lying on the side of contrarian, and now you just go and explain upselling. You just go and explaining, you don't want to discount. Like, if a client's been buying from you for 3-5 years, and then you have this massive discount for new clients, do you see how your existing client sees that promotion on Facebook and the sign and the email and goes, "What the heck's going on here? Like, I've been buying for X amount of time. I should also be able to get, that discount." So that would be an example. And then you'd go on to explain it. There it is. But the headline at the top, a little bit contrarian, you'll get more eyeballs, etc. Right? And do understand that if you're going, like, if you're on Facebook, if you're on Insta, like, he or she, they got 10,000 people following. The goal is to get coaching clients, right? The goal, you should be very, very strategic in a step-by-step way to know that, look, the goal is to get clients. And I can tell you that you do not get coaching clients on social media. Please, the number of times that I answer this by an email or a conversation with a coach, or, even in the Q&A that we do here, right, Road Dog? Like, people are trying to get clients on social media. It's not happening. You get coaching clients over the phone or face-to-face, conversation over, mic drop, the end. That's it, right? So, therefore, that post, careful, what I say, careful not to upsell. Okay, the goal of that is to get some engagement. Take the engagement, turn it into a private message on Facebook, and take it from a private message on Facebook to a conversation over the phone, and then a conversation over the phone to a one-to-one meeting where you close coaching clients. But you see how that's a 1, 2, 3, 4 step-by-step process? And in your mind, you always want to be thinking about that. I think a lot of folks, I think we all know this, and we've seen it with our clients, they're spending so much time farting around on social media that it literally blows my mind, right? Like, the goal is to get a client, so take them from the post to the private message, but not too quickly. And don't try sell. If you try to sell just one step too early, you could kill the whole thing, right? So, and I don't have like okay, so this is exactly the way to do it, because every situation will be a little bit, unique. I'm kind of riffing here, but so one of the other things that I've got is, so if somebody's trying to make, because really the question is, how do I make social media work for me and turn it into coaching clients? 10,000 followers. To some, that might sound like a huge number. To others, it sounds like a piddly little number. It probably lives somewhere in the middle. But this is not, a huge number by any stretch of the imagination. Really, I think that you need more engagement, and a great way to get engagement is Gary V's, what he calls a $1.80 strategy. Okay, so what he says is you should put your 2 cents in 90 times a day, right? So 90 times 2, it's $1.80, right? That's why he calls it a $1.80 strategy. And all you do is before you do this, like somebody says, I've been challenged, creating an upsell, right? Like, do you want me to supersize that? So you go in and then you chime in with something like you're, careful not to upsell. You go in and chime in with the same verbiage that you would otherwise put straight onto your Facebook profile, your LinkedIn profile, or Insta, right? So you plug that in, and then basically the person reading is going to go, wow, like that's unbelievable. The challenge is like, how are you going to go about writing, like, let's say that's going to be like, 250 words. You're like, Karl, you want me to sit there and 90 times a day write out 250 words? Are you freaking crazy, right? There'll be no time left in the day for me to do anything else, right? And I'm a 2-finger typer. Here's how you do it. You create, I sent out an email some time ago, but it was something like social media magic posts or social media client getting posts, something to that effect. But create a Word document. And remember, we're here for 10 years. This is, macro, not micro. You got to accept that these things evolve and improve over time. Well, I want you to get a ton of information, on upsells, cross-sells, downsells, upfront offers, raising your prices. Now, you're going to find verbiage of 250 words for all of those different disciplines, right? Well, you take that copy, and then every time that it comes up on somebody's profile or in a comment or in a post, you take it and then you chuck, that 250 verbiage with a little bit of customization. It's going to save you an enormous amount of time. But the person who wrote, I'm struggling to come up with an upsell, or a cross-sell for my law office. And then you say, well, why don't you say, do you want a will with that, right? Like that will work. So you create all this templated stuff. And I'm going to tell you, you start posting, 250 word kick butt, answers to this stuff. You will all of a sudden get a lot of attention. You'll have people start, posting, hey, I had that literally this weekend. I had a guy, he had a question, something about if the CEO looks after all the staff, who looks after the CEO, right? And I didn't see the post, and the guy literally commented, he said, Karl Bryan, I want your opinion on this, right? And then I went in, I chimed in a little bit, smart ass remark at first. Of course, I put his wife, right? And then I just put a little bit of extra verbiage, but I had somebody literally post like, Karl, I want your opinion on this because they've obviously seen some of my other stuff. You'll start to get that kind of engagement. And believe me, that kind of engagement can lead to clients pretty damn fast. So that's what I'd say on that one. One other thing though, I also find that I have personally had some success with, if you put something up on Facebook and I think it's pretty cool, I'll just put like kaboom, the end, mic drop. Like it's very complimentary to you as in the person that read it, but also I think that the confidence and that just, putting a one-word the end to somebody else's post, I think there's a level of confidence and a level of intrigue that it brings other people to. And then I have found that people are reading that, they end up on my profile and they're either, commenting on my stuff or friend requesting me or whatever that might be, or, trying to connect with me. So I find that works, and I think that has a bit of a contrarian feel to it. When Road Dogg puts something really cool on the internet and I go the end, right? I think it's got power. So that's what I'd say. Most important, Road Dogg, the way I want to finish here is that make sure your goal of social media is not to waste a bunch of time and get a bunch of engagement and make everybody feel good about themselves. Your goal is to take your engagement into a private message, the private message into a phone call. Remember, curiosity. You guys listen to me at all. You hear me use that word all the time. The way that you'll get them on the phone is through curiosity. And then you get them on the phone, and then from the phone into a proper consultation, that's where you sell coaching. But don't go out there and spend a bunch of time farting around on social media and, basically wasting your time. And it comes in two forms: entertainment, education. People want to be educated, but they'd rather be entertained. So make sure that there's a component of entertainment to the stuff that you are doing. So that's what I would say to our social media friend there, Road Dog.
Well, it's the only other thing I'm going to add to that, Karl, is consistency, right? Don't be like anything in life. It's no different than your daily habits where anything. You can't expect to go to the gym, a couple sporadically and then be in the best shape of your life. You're going to be on social media. Be consistent, and whatever that means to you, right? If it's daily, it's daily. If it's every other day, it's every other day. If it's 5 times a day, do that. But just have that level of consistency in what you're doing, I think, is very, very important. And the other thing, especially for that $1.80 strategy that you talk about, man, like that can drain you. So just keep in mind, search hashtags. Like if you're on Instagram, just search the hashtag, and now you're finding the relevant groups, the relevant posts, right? And that's super duper important there, I think. So because that way it's not like you're just scrolling an endless trying to find, because you'd be amazed at how little content and in terms of actual things anyone cares about. When you start scrolling your feed, you're like, oh my God. Like even if you're just trying to compliment, 5 people a day and you go onto your news feed, it's painful, man. Like there's a lot of garbage being posted, but not your stuff. Unless it's about Tom Brady, then I will scroll past it. But if you've got Taylor Swift, I'm stopping every time.
She's hot, dude. That woman. Oh my.
So on that note, all right, something completely different. Here's a good question. So this person asks, I'm working with a larger company. Okay, they are tactical, but they're lacking strategy. So that's kind of a unique one that I don't think I've seen too often. But is there a roadmap that you would sort of follow or help them create to kind of have a more of a strategic outlook?
First, again, I think bloody good question is what I think. So first of all, I'd start with this. Now, depending upon the dynamics of the situation, I've been known to say this in the past, and I'm going to say it here because I think it's important. Before you go strategy, and remember, strategy eats tactic for breakfast, right? End of story, mic drop, the end for sure, right? And your business, my business, everybody's business. But here's what I think. Like when I start a coaching relationship with you, I need to have wins, right? Like the wins result in trust, and quite frankly, a little bit of time, right? Like if, it's like when I play hockey, right? Like if I pass you the puck, the reason we pass the puck is I'm trying to create time for you, right? Like I give you the puck and there's nobody on you. It's much better on your stick than on my stick when I've got somebody there. So like when I create a short-term win for a client, it gives me that time. It gives me the ability and the trust and also just a little bit of a gap, right? There's not the urgency of, this strategy better work. So I'm saying that I think in the first 30, 60, 90 days, you should consider, and every situation is unique, to go a little bit tactical, to get a few runs on the board so that now you've got that time and space with the client to go get all strategic, because strategy is a step backwards to take 2, hopefully 3 forwards. Well, that step backwards doesn't feel very good for anybody. Remember, progress equals happiness. So I do want to start with that. So you got take that on board and think about it before you go heavy strategy, even when they say that's what they need, right? Remember, the dynamics of these coaching relationships can be interesting ones. So consider that. So look, there's 4 steps, right, to creating strategy. They should be data driven. Okay. And I don't remember, like, if you guys read my emails or heard, I often say this, that, go with your gut. What does gut stand for? Gave up thinking. Okay. So think of these 4 steps. They should be data driven. Okay. The strategy. They should be forward leaning. And again, that probably sounds pretty obvious, but I tell you, I've met a lot of businesses and seen a lot of folks that are, they'd be the exact opposite of forward leaning, and your government would be one of them. They should focus on measured outcomes. I think that's insanely rare. And then they should be able to nail and talk about their overarching strategy should be able to be said in one sentence, and then everybody should know it. We've all walked into the business where, the CEO or the boss is there, and outside his door is like this mission statement, and it's like 100 words long, and then you say, hey, could you just repeat that for me? Right? And of course they're like, well, here's what it says, and then they paraphrase it, right? And that's not it. Like an example is Southwest Airlines. Their one sentence strategy is a plane on the ground makes no money, right? Internally with us, with my business partner Adrian and I, we often talk, a business coach with no clients cancels. Right? So again, we just understand we have to get our coaches clients. Like that's why we have an A to Z solution. Like Adrian and I, we've created software and got profit acceleration software and the 2.0 version and the membership site and a whole bunch of awesome tools that, quite frankly, if you're a business coach, let's face it, like these things are amazing, right? Like $50,000 marketing turnkeys completed for a client before you get started, right? We have all this stuff templated. Well, they're completely useless if you don't have the ability to get in front of a business owner. And then not only get in front of a business owner, but can convert them to a $2,000 a month coaching client. And then once you convert them into a coaching client, the third thing, you got to be able to fulfill on the deliverables, like keep the coaching client for a long period of time, right? Like otherwise the tools are an absolute waste of time. So you need to have, that A to Z strategy where I think a lot of folks, they try to nail down and they don't have the A to Z strategy. So they end up with this great software, great tools, great XYZ, but nobody coming in and buying the suit. Right. So, being able to take the strategy and nailing it down into one strategy or into, one bit of verbiage, like Tony Robbins is trying to cure world hunger. Like it's pretty obvious, what the guy is trying to accomplish. And if you see, like when he sold his book, Money Master the Game, all of the money, plus he doubled all of the profits from the book, went to, feeding folks that were in need. And then he also, I believe he doubled up, like say he sold $10 million worth of books. Well, he doubled, actually it was significantly more than that, but he doubled whatever the number was, he actually chucked in, he equaled the amount, right? So anyway, so that's, again, being able to nail it down into one, sentence is good. Remember, complex is interesting, but simple is useful, right? So always, Steve Jobs was the absolute master of that, right? He was always he'd look at the iPhone, he'd look at anything, and he's just like, how can we dumb this down? How can we simplify it? What can we take away as opposed to what can we add? And that doesn't mean that he didn't add and they didn't put, bells and whistles on it. It's just that they tried to, strip it down to its most simple form. When you're helping your business owner, again, complex is interesting, but simple is useful. Simple is going to get done. Think of the tactical versus strategy that I talked about a second ago, right? So those are the four strategies. That would be like, data-driven, forward-leaning, measured outcomes, which are very rare, and being able to succinctly tighten up what it is that they do, put it in one sentence, and then tell everybody. It's one thing to come up with the sentence, but then it's a whole other thing to have the entire company know it and be able to spit it out at the drop of a hat, right? Like big, long visions, vision boards and vision statements and whatnot. I'm not a fan. I think just tighten it, create, 10 words or less, and you are off to the races. So those would be the 4 steps, Road Dog, around.
So when you're talking about, obviously, coaches need clients, that's kind of pretty obvious, right? Thanks, Captain Obvious, for pointing that out. But it kind of leads into another question here. So when looking at, like, you go in, maybe you've got a prospect, whatever, or maybe you just start working with somebody, you're looking at their financials, and you're trying to find essentially your coaching fees, right? So, and I know, again, everyone knows, if they've been listening for any amount of time, you are, going into accounting for some bizarro reason. Karl Bryan is fascinated by accounting and numbers. We all have our things, and I'll tell you this: accounting is definitely not it for me. But now that you're diving into it more, is there anything that you would look for specifically to try and recoup? You're saying, like a $2,000 coaching client. Like, where would I look first to try and recoup that?
Okay, where would you look? So, okay, I've spoken about this a number of times, so hopefully this will be, but I think it's important to reinforce it's important. First place, accounts receivable, very simple, found on the balance sheet. If they have an accounts, I send out an email. If they have a accounts receivable problem at 500,000, they're going to have a significantly bigger problem at 1 million in revenues, right? But I think that we try to hide behind that and they go buy a bunch of Facebook ads. Like, think about the stupidity of having an accounts receivable problem. They've bought the ads, sold the widget, paid, for the widget to be developed. They have paid their sales guy. Everybody's got bonuses, and then they don't collect the money, right? Like, it's crazy. So first place you go is right there. And if they have an accounts receivable problem, this is amazing for you, because guess what? You're about to earn your coaching fees in record time. Remember, this isn't this isn't a task that should be delegated, right? At the end of the day, accounts receivable, inventory. Again, the show The Profit, Marcus Lemonis, love the guy. I think that every business coach should be watching the show The Profit. I think it's incredible. Often you'll see he goes into companies that have inventory problems for, again, very obvious reasons, because he knows he can go in and fix it real quick. So have a look at inventory. Accounts payable is one that's not not as obvious, but important. It's, what you'll hear from the business owners, oh no, like, I pay all my bills immediately. I don't like to owe anybody money. I don't like to be in debt. Yada, yada, all kinds of stories, right? Well, think about the dynamic. A business doesn't go out of business because it runs out of ideas. It goes out of business because it runs out of cash, right? Well, don't be in such a hurry to pay everybody. That in no way, shape, or form is saying that you don't pay everybody 100%, right? You pay them, but when you sign the deal, especially when they really want you, come up with some terms that are advantageous to you. Like, you want 60-day terms, or if you do pay up front, you're realizing a 4 to 7, depending upon the industry and the product, but a 4 to 7% discount when you pay up front, right? I'm just going to pay you up front for, make you guys feel good about yourselves. If you buy something from Apple, they do not pay you for 91 days. And the logic behind that is it takes 90 days to sell an iPhone, so they figure they should wait 90 days to pay you. Just that simple. And again, you sign up tomorrow and you have a small little business and cash flow is very important. Apple do not care. This is a company policy, and they don't pay you for 91 days. They could pay you, they could pay you 30 days early, right? They're the most cash flush business on the planet, but this is a policy I think we should all learn from that. And I don't need to meet your business coaching clients to know that sounds crazy to them, right? Like, what? What do you mean? You know what I mean? And accounts payable, does it really matter if I pay now or later? It matters big time, and it makes your financials look significantly more exciting. But at the end of the day, make sure that they're not in in a dynamic where they're paying everybody up front and then not getting paid themselves for 30, 60, 90 days. That creates a cash flow nightmare. But really in this one, look, you really want to get familiar. The income statement is where the magic is for a business coach. Kind of also double magic is that once you learn, if there's nothing overly exciting about an income statement, it's very, of all of the the financial documents, it's easily the easiest to read. And you could literally go into the client's bank account, and not that they're probably going to allow you to do that, and that would be a bit weird, but you totally could, and you could certainly guide them on how to do it. But you could basically, create an income statement for them without speaking to their accountant, just by having a look at their credit card statements and their bank account, right? So, but ultimately, that's where you're going to find the magic. And I'll just, in a nutshell, guys, it's cost of goods sold, and then it's expenses. You want to go through the line, like their expenses, line item by line item. And this is where you want to find, this is where you will find your fees. They have got, I don't need to sit down with them. They haven't looked at their expenses. Think about this. They haven't looked at their expenses in 12 months, and in many cases, 3 years with a critical eye. Okay? So you go through those bad boys line by line, and the amount of money that you'll be able to save them. And it's not just about putting a line through something. In some cases, it's this word, negotiation, which business owners, again, because they're not comfortable with those uncomfortable conversations, and they don't want to piss anybody off, and they don't want to upset anybody. They'd rather just go make more money, quite frankly. One of the smartest things that they can do is go back to all of their suppliers and start renegotiating some of the expenses. And in some cases it will work, in some cases it won't. They'll learn some very valuable skills. They'll start feeling like a business owner, because you can high five them at the end of the day and say, welcome to the world of working on your business. That's what you did today. Whereas, just ripping around in it. So you'd find it there, but I'd come back to, so here are 3 words. If you guys have the ability to write down 3 words, and you'll hear these from me consistently, and no doubt through emails over the coming months and years for sure. But write down these 3 words: comparables, trends, relationships. That when you're looking at financial documents, I want you to just think of those 3 words are going to simplify everything for you, make it a lot easier to get your head around. So let me go through them one by one very quickly. Comparables. Financial statements are a waste of time, or it's not that they're a waste of time. They're not telling you any kind of story without a comparable. In other words, if I'm looking at the income statement, I need to look at one from last week, last month, last year, last quarter to compare it. The same way that if I stand on a scale and I'm 180 pounds, if I was 160, this isn't so good, but if I was 210 3 months ago, it looks like I'm losing some weight. This is probably good news, right? So you need to have a comparable. You do not look at financial statements without another one to be able to gauge. And if they get financial statements from their accountant with about 90% predictability, they will give them one shot, right? Like as in they won't provide the comparables. They'll just give them their financial statements from X period. And by the way, most business owners are actually looking at their tax return and calling those financial statements, right? Which is similar to taking a watermelon and calling it a hat, right? Like there's nothing, they're 2 different, completely different things, okay? So comparables, pretty straightforward. You got to have 2, if not 3, if not 4, okay? The second one is trends. So now I want you to picture you've got financial statements laying on a, you could do it in a document, or you could just slide financial statements from, 2 years ago, last year, and then this year on a table. Okay, and I want you to go from left to right and put an arrow. Well, what you're going to find is there's going to be trends. Okay, so let's just look at revenues to keep it nice and simple. Revenues, what did they do 2 years ago? What did they do last year? And what did they do this year? There's a trend. They went up, they went down, they went up, and then down. Okay, well, now you have a trend. You go one line down and you're going to see your gross, you're going to see cost of goods sold, and then you're going to see gross profit. You go left to right. What did your gross profit do? Did it go up? Did it go down? Did it go up and then down? There's a trend there, right? We're going to go into your expenses. Did they go up? Did they go down? Did they go up and then down, right? So there's a trend there, right? So, and then of course, then you've got your bottom line, your earnings, your profit, right? Which again, all mean the same damn thing, and they just try to confuse the hell out of you. But at the end of the day, at the bottom, what everybody goes to is the bottom line at the bottom of an income statement. This is the one that they get either excited or depressed about, which again, if you understand financials, this is not, the bottom line does not tell the top part. If you can picture an income statement, at the bottom, you've got a bottom line with a circle. Well, all the numbers above that tell the story, and then the bottom line is just the bottom line. Well, I'd significantly rather hear the story than see the bottom line number, right? So then I could tell, like, where are these numbers going? Which brings me to the third thing. So you've got trends going left to right, and now I want you to take an arrow on those same 3 financial statements, income statements, laying down on your desk, and an arrow from top to bottom, and now that's relationships. Okay, what does that mean? So here's my question: what is the relationship between revenues and gross profit? Okay, let's say that it's 50%. Okay, it's 50%. Well, my next question as I go down the income statement is, what's the relationship between gross profit and net profit, or earnings, bottom line? What's that relationship? If that relationship is that, my gross profit is 50 and then my net profit is 20, the question I ask is, how could I get my net profit, up to 30%? Right? Instead of just 20, a little bit fine. And if they're 10, I want to ask a question how I get it to 20. But at the end of the day, the numbers you're going down with your arrow, relationship between these numbers. My question, rent to revenues. So what common sizing is taking an income statement and then basically taking percentages compared to revenue. So if you've got rent of $250,000 and your revenues were $1 million, on the common size balance sheet, you're going to have 25%. Okay, well, that's a relationship between those 2 numbers, right? My question is it a good relationship or is it a bad? You tell me, guys, if a client is paying 25% of their revenues on rent, and remember, the reason you're paying the rent has a lot to do with location. Well, my question is this the best location? Are we spending way too much for not enough foot traffic? These are some of the questions that you'd start to ask, right? Like food waste as an example, huge expense in a restaurant. You're going to have staff as the number one expense, and then you're going to have food, and then wastage is a huge one, right? Either they feed the poor folks that come in crappy food by keeping it around too long, or they're throwing it out and they're wasting a lot of money. Well, my question is, as compared to revenues, what is that relationship? What's that common sized number between how much money you're spending on food and then what your revenues are? You're going to make sure that that number is right. And if it's not, you're going to start asking yourself some questions about the process that you're following when you're doing your ordering. Like, who the hell is doing the ordering? And often it's the owner of the company, super duper busy. The supplier calls. He says, just send what we got last month. That'll do. Hang up the phone, and he moves on with his day because he's stuck in his business and not working on it. And he hasn't seen a financial statement probably ever, or for a very long time, or he's making the mistake of looking at his tax return and thinking that that is a financial statement. So relationships, you kind of get that. You're going up, and then you're cruising down the financial document to say, okay, well, what is it? What's the relationship between revenues and the bottom line? Like, what is that number? And is it high enough? And then the question is, how can you increase it? So those three words, comparables, trends, relationships, you hear a lot about those from me in the future. And that is what I'd be thinking when that's what I'm thinking about when I'm looking at financial statements. And there's really only three. Like, you go to an accountant, and again, they're almost designed to confuse the hell out of you, and for good reason, because the government wants all your dough. So what I'd be thinking about is that, like, there's an accountant could provide like 100 different financial documents, but there's only three you really need to understand. And I promise you, they're just not that hard. It's a balance sheet, it's an income statement, and it's a cash flow statement or cash statement, which most people haven't seen a cash statement, and it's arguably the most important of all three. But so that's what I'm looking at, man. But accounts receivable, right? Again, inventory, these types of places, this is where you're going to find, big gaping holes. You go to look at revenues, and here's my question. If a business raises their prices by 2.5%, 5%, 10%, every single dollar that is now accumulated would go straight to profit, because there's no added expense in raising your prices, right? So again, this is how you could look at a balance sheet, a income statement, go straight to revenues, which is the top line, and just go, okay, well, how can we make this number bigger? Like, there's 5 numbers you want to think about here. Go to revenues. How do you make that number bigger? Second, go to expenses. How do you make that number smaller? Go to inventory. Can't necessarily make it bigger or smaller as a prime objective. The question, though, is that you want to get it down so that it's in control, but not down so far that now they're not able to fulfill orders. Clearly, that's stupidity. So you need to understand their inventory situation at a decent level. And then you go to accounts payable, which is absolutely, just one of those things where what they say is, I'm profitable, but I got no cash. Again, accounts payable is a classic example where they're making a big, big boo-boo, where they're paying everybody up front and then not getting paid for 90 days and wondering where their cash is. Well, it's in their suppliers' bank accounts. That's where it is, right? And you're waiting on your clients to pay you, and then around and around and around she goes. And then you're in business for 3 to 5 years, and you add in bad debts, and it's not surprising when you could create a create a cash flow issue. But anyway, so those are the areas, Road Dog, that I'd look, and that's the way I would explain, where I'd find my fees.
That's good. The one word, as you're just talking about, that popped into my brain just at the end here was capacity. Like, what's the capacity of you being able to scale the business as well, right? Like, because you're saying you may run into that issue of you can only fulfill so many orders, right? I think that'd be an interesting one to throw into that mix as well, as capacity. Like, do they have the capacity to handle the added volume and or whatever they're selling, right?
100%. That's resources, right? They become Like they're, like resources become at a premium. Like, and resources are basically, your people, your cash. Like, it's like, oh, you could make this massive sale and make all these sales, but can you afford to fulfill? And then if you can't, it's like a business coach, right? Road Dogg, you and I, we did an event, right? We sold literally 100% of the people in the room bought. I think one of them fell off. But at the end of the day, every single one of them bought high-end coaching for $1,000 a month and above. But you have to have the capacity to be able to look after all those folks. So if you signed up, let's say 20 coaching clients literally in one day, and you already had 10, there's a good chance you're going to drop the ball with those 20 new clients. So filling this huge event and having these amazing conversions can actually come back and bite you on the butt, because you're not going to have the client hire you, not have it go well, basically the relationship gets canceled, and then have them call you back in 90 days and say, hey, let's have a fresh start. Well, that's not what happens, right? So that's an example where a business coach capacity is a huge fine line that they've got to, they have to teeter between supply and demand.
I do like the thought of getting a little bit more obsessed about the numbers, though, because it's for me, it's an area that I try to avoid. Again, I was in financial services for 16 years, and it's definitely an area that I try to stay away from. For me, I light up when it comes to the marketing side and finding more recurring revenues and stuff like that. But when you talk about there's the bottom line, and then there's the story that tells that bottom line. There's far too many people that aren't taking that interest. Like, what is that story? And what if the story shifted? What kind of an effect would that have, right? And that's always the way that it is. And it's anyways, it's very, very cool, man. I'm looking forward to obviously you rolling out even more, because this comparables, trends, relationships. I see where you're going with it. And again, you're early days, I think, in this, and I can't wait for your knowledge to expand even deeper with that, because I think you're onto something absolutely massive there. So looking forward to that. Listen, we're kind of at the end here, bud. I learned something about you saying something about being 180 pounds on a scale, so that was not correct. And but thank you for informing me that watermelons are in fact not hats. I'll send the memo to the province of Saskatchewan and let them know that is the case, because I think they're all going to be very disappointed with that, because they do. Does Green Bay or something do something similar? I don't know, but I know in Saskatchewan. Sorry if we offended the people of Saskatchewan today. You can continue to wear watermelons as hats. So there you go. Any other parting words from
Road Dogg? I think that's a perfect way to end it, dude. Appreciate you, bud. You're a legend, hilarious man. You get the chance to drink a beer with Road Dogg, you should take that opportunity, boys and girls, because the guy is an absolute hoot. But anywho, man, appreciate you, bud. Again, keep those questions flowing, guys. You can send them through to karlbryan.com or through the magazine. Easy guy to find. So just send them through. Easy peasy. But guys, I want to appreciate you for being here, of course. And if you could do us a favor and rate the episode, that would be super duper. And if you could give us a review, even more super duper. And if you know somebody who would make a great business coach, a sales type, or a highly motivated individual, send this through to them and encourage them to become a business coach. And also, if you know an existing business coach needs to get their act together and could use a little bit of advice and direction, send them to us, folks. That would be super duper appreciated. But that is it for today. I want to say thank you for everybody listening, and we'll see you next time. Sound good?
Thanks, everybody. Make it a great week.
Karl Bryan built Profit Acceleration Software 2.0 to train business coaches how to find any small business owner more than $100,000 in 45 minutes without them spending an extra dollar on marketing or advertising. This becomes a business coach's superpower. So as a business coach, you'll never again have to worry about working with business owners that can't afford your high-end coaching fees. Check us out at focused.com.